Let's see if that's working. Okay. Let me just check that is working now. Okay, let's just go one step. Let's see. Oh, give me 1 second. Just want to see if we are loading up correctly. Oh, Rachel is on board. Good, Rachel. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, good. So we are connected. That's what I wanted to make sure. All right, very good. Everybody is here bright and early. Not everybody, certainly a large number. So glad to see all of you at this Shabbat. And they're going to start up our service. Okay, so now I hear me, which is what I don't want to do. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to do a warm-up for us. This is a very popular melody taken from words of the first chief rabbi of the settlement of Israel, I call the original predecessor to the state of Israel, Rav Kook, maybe the pioneer of religious Zionism, we might say. And this is an the ability of the human being to fly above all, spiritually and morally. Ale ben Adam. Higher and higher you. You have wings of spirituality. The wings of the
דרוש אותם דרוש בן אדם וימצאו מיד.
Just seek these wings and you shall find far higher.
Al
take these wings. Remember the song Blackbird, Take These Wings and Learn to Fly? Beatles song, right? That's the ideas of Rav Kook. Take these wings that we have, these spiritual wings, and fly higher. The idea that we are a religion of potential, of human potential, not of human damnation and salvation, but of the ability of the human being to fly higher, to reach heights of potential. And that's the message. And I think we need that message very much so. Materially, we have. It is our inner nefesh worldwide that we need to cultivate. So we open our service with Shochein Ad together. Shochein Ad Marom Vekadosh Shemo Vechatuv Ranu Tzadikim Baronai Layisharim Navat Tehila Lefi Yisharim Tahala Ov Divrei Tzadikim Torah Ov Shon Chasidim Tidrama Ov Keref Kedoshim Tihit Kahadash Over Makalot, Tibevot, Amcha Beit Yisrael.
Very nice.
Together, Shabbat, Shimcha, Lad, Makenu, El Machakarav, Shemai Boret. ברכות והודעות מעתה ביד העולם ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בתשבחות ילדות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה הלך העולמים. We continue together with the Baruch, the call to worship. Baruch Et Adonai Mevorach Baruch Adonai Leolam Vaed Baruch Adonai Mechal Mitzvah Baruch Hashem Oseh Shalom Ureis HaKol Oseh Shalom Ureis HaKol. Okay, I see our friend Yoni was able to get on the Shabbat. Very good. And we're going to continue with the Song of the Angels and the planets and the stars, the El Adon. Let me know. continue now the praise of the angels and the visions of Isaiah and Ezekiel. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, and praise be the name, the glory of God from his dwelling place. And so we continue the bottom of this page. וכולם מקבלים עליהם או מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצם בנחת רוח בסופרים הקדושה, כולם כי אחרים ביראה, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות בארץ כבודו, ואופנים וחיות הקודש ברש, כרום מתנסים לעומת צרפים, תם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקום מול. And we wrap up the theme of morning lights, physical light and the light of redemption, and then cause a new light to shine upon all of us and upon Zion. May we all delight in splendor. And the last lines, Or Chadash, Al Tzion Ta'ir, Baruch Atar Nayotzeh. Then we can all sing together the next five. Ava Rabba Haftanu Adonai Eloheinu Ela Gedola V'Terach Hamata Aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Avur Avoteinu Shematnu Becha Avinu Malkeinu V'Tilamdeim Chukei Chayim Kein Techaneinu Lamdeinu Avinu Ha'avarach Hamad Amrachem Rachem Aleinu V'Teim B'Libeinu Lehavin Lahaskel Lishmoa Limod Lelamed Lishmoa V'Laso Ulekayem Ekol Divrei Talmud Torah B'Ahava V'Ha'erinenu B'Toratecha V'Dahabek Libeinu B'Mitzvotecha V'Yachel Levaveinu Yahava Ulera Et Shemecha V'Lo Nevosh Le'olam Ed V'Lo Nevosh Le'olam Ed V'Shem Kodecha Agadol V'Nora V'Tachnona Gilav V'Nismecha Gilav V'Nismecha B'Shuvasecha Avienu L'Shalom Me'ava Kanfot Ores Tolichenu Kamemiut Le'arzeinu Yeshua Tavanu V'Chata V'Kala V'Lashon Keraftanu L'Shem Chagados Elos Ela B'Yemet Odot Lecha Oyachecha B'Yahava Baruch Ataranai Sheva Moyeseh B'Yahava. Now we're going to go ahead with the Shema, with the
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai Echad.
Continue with the half together. Ve'ahavta et Adonaicha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol modecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinamta levanecha v'dibartam v'shivtecha b'beitecha v'lecha b'derech shofrecha u'b'tumecha u'kshatam le'od al yadecha Lutotafot be'ein einecha, uktaktam amzotetecha v'isharecha. And then we continue silently, scroll down for the collective command for the nation to love. Now we continue the last paragraph of the Shema reading. We take the tzitzit in hand. Vayomer Adonai Moshe Lemor, Daber b'nei Yisrael, ata lehem, su lahem tzitzit, al kanpei b'gehem ledorotam, v'natnu tzitzit, al kanaf b'tel techelet, v'lachem letzitzit, ritihem oto, atem mikol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam, v'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei nechem, asher atem zonim bachem, למען תזכרו, עשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוניכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אלוהיכם אמת. אני אלוהיכם אמת, true and faithful God. And we continue with the words of liberation of the children of Israel as they pass through from slavery to freedom, the shores of the Red Sea. At the bottom of the page, Tilod le'ele yom baruchu mevorach Moshe u'bnei Yisrael chanu shirav b'simcha rav v'imru chulam mi kamocha b'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedor b'kodesh norati lod osef ele Shira chadash shivchu geolim shemcha sefat hayam Shira chadash shivchu geolim shemcha sefat hayam Yachad kulam hodu Yachad kulam hodu v'neichol yamru Adonai Yamloch le'olam to Yisrael, Kumar v'yazak Yisrael, Omlechinu mecha Yehuda v'Yisrael, Go'aleinu, Adonai Tzevaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch, Adonai, Go'al Yisrael. We're going to continue the opening of the meeting together, and then the Kedusha. We add the Ya'aleh V'Yavo, the special prayer for the new month. When we come to it, I'll get it there for you. Okay. Adonai sifatai tiftach upi yagid tehilatecha baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elahei Abraham Elahei Yitzchak Elahei Yaakov Elahei Sarai Elahei Rivka Elahei Rachel Elahei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Adonai Eleyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Nehem L'man Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer Moshe Baruch Adonai Magen Abraham Poked Sarah Atagi boy Lamaranai, Hametim Atarab Loshia,
מה שברוח
Rida Gashem,
Gashem,
Mechake Chaim Bechesed, Mechayem Meitim Berachamim Rabbi, Tomech Noflim Berofech Holim, Omati Rapsurim, Omekayem Emunato, Mishene Alvar, Mikamo Chava Gevurot, Omido Melach, Melech Mimi, Omechayem, Matzmiach Yeshua, Emon Atol Chayot, Adonai Mechayem, Ameitim. Kedusha, Nekadishim Chabalam, Kishem Shemakdishim Otabishmei Maram, Katuv Ayad Nevi'echa, Tarzazevi Omar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivaot, La'aretz Kevodo, Ozbiko Rash Gadol, Adiv Chazak Mashmim Kol, Midnasim U'Matzerafim, Nomatom Baruch Yameru, Baruch Varanai, Emek Oy mim kam ha ma kenu tofia vetim lo chalenu kim chagim anachnu lach atai tim loch betzion korvir betishkam et gadach betit kahadash betoch Yerushalayim mircha ledoer vador Netzachim v'yereinu tirena tirena machutecha kadovor amor b'shirei uzer ayre David Shechte kacha lo harei le'olam El Hayat Zion L'Dovodo Hallelujah L'Dovodo Nagid
Lecha,
Netzach Netzachim Nagish Kevchacha Eloheinu
Hainu Pini Yom Shmoyim Boy,
Kiem Melch Elovi Keroshata Baruch Atmael Akadosh
ישמח מוישה במתנ"ס חלקו. Master Balash. I know I was on side of the Zen Clutch. I remember I went up on the Shabbat Discussion. We see silent.
We add Eloheinu, Eloheinu, Yalev, Yabov, Yagia, Yerev, Yerotiv, Shemai, Fakeh. Zechah, Zechah, Ben David, Abdecha, Zechah, Am Chabet Yisrael, Fleit, Letovah, Chaim, Chesed, Achavim, Chaim, Uleshalom.
Amen.
ביום ראש החודש הזה, זכינו נבוא לטובה, ורדנו נבוא לברכה, ושנבוא לחיים, וישו ברכה מיוצאנו, ברכים עלינו ושירים כלחננו, מחנו ברחמתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, עשי שנתו לציון.
שחסננו כל זמן
ביום לא מברח, ותום השם חכנו, תמיד לעולם ועד,
שום טוב וכאן כזה, אני בנגון מחדות לחם זרז חיים על חס וגלוב, אנחנו חיים שום טוב, שום שום, שום חבל, שום לחם, שום בשלום.
Amen. And we'll go for a prize here to Sim Shalom. And this one, Sim Shalom, sung in
Un mūsu koncerta noslēgumā,
Moskva, I think, Moscow.
lai skan vēlreiz šis brīnišķīgais duets, Sim Shalom dāvā mums mieru.
This Sim and
Let's skip
here
ahead.
is the opportunity to sing with the
Но если вы не знаете эту мелодию,
sing it anyhow.
пойте как хотите.
You heard, he said, sing it anyway.
Yeah. Sim.
Sim shalom tova
Tova
uvracha,
uvracham.
ein v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol
Kol
Yisrael.
Yisrael.
Amen.
Amen.
Sim shalom
V'chesed v'rachamim. Kol Yisrael.
Barcheinu Avinu Avinu, Barcheinu Avinu Avinu, Kulanu keyechad beyor panecha. Barcheinu Avinu Avinu, Barcheinu Avinu Avinu, Kulanu keyechad beyor panecha. Sim
Shalom tova
No, no, no.
uvracha,
Ay, bye, 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 bye.
aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Sim shalom
Ay, bye, 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 Ki be'obanecha nosata lano. Ay, ki be'obanecha nosata lano, Hashem Elokeinu. Toiras chaim ve'yavas chesed, Tzedaka, uveracha verachamim vechaim ve'shalom.
Shalom tova uvracha, ein v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Sim shalom tova uvracha, ein v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך.
כתוב בעיניך ועיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך.
שלום תורה חסד ורחמים עלינו ועל ישראל. אמן. שלום תורה חסד ורחמים עלינו ועל ישראל.
Okay, deserve a round of applause. Sim Shalom Tova, bring peace and goodness upon the earth. We come to our lesson for the morning from Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Yossi Omer, continuing in attributes, traits of human beings that we should cultivate. Yehei mamon chavercha chavib alecha kishecha. May the property of your friend.
We don't do Hallel today?
Yes. Thank you, Marcelo. We're going to the Hallel first. It's good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
jumping ahead of myself.
110, I think.
One step too far. And for the Hallel, going to go down to the, it's going to be on the bottom of our ear. Okay. There we go. Continue together with the blessing of the Hallel. And then we're going to have some musical selections for Hallel. We cite together the blessing of the Hallel together, which is on the screen in front of you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu shlotav v'tzivanu lekrot ha'Hallel. Hallelujah, 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 Shem Adonai, Shem Adonai, mevarach be'al ha'olam, imez Hashem eshad mavo, lo Shem Adonai. From the setting of the sun till its rising, from the rising to the setting, the name of the Lord will constantly be blessed. That is the theme of Hallel, the praise, the songs of praise. We're going to kick a few of them here and there to B'tzeit Yisrael, and this version from Israel, B'tzeit Yisrael. Out of the desert into the city of Tel Aviv. interesting visuals, desert and urban scene, and also a mix of populations that make up Israel today. You have the Ashkenazi, you have the Mizrahi Jews, you have the Arab population. You also have an influx of African and Asian, Central Asian and Far Asian into the mix that makes up Israel. So it gives a nod to that also. The last part of the melody, an Ethiopian tone, to the Israeli rock style. Let's go ahead then. And like that for us. We shall go ahead on number 115, Psalm 115. Yevorech et Beit Yisrael, Yevorech et Beit Aaron, Yevorech Yirei Adonai, Aktanim im Hagolim, Yosef Alechem, Alechem Alechem, Beruch Yisrael Adonai, Oseh Shamayim Ba'aretz, Shamayim L'Adonai, Varech Adam Livnei Adam, Ameitim Hallelujah, Velo Kol Yadedo Ma, Anachnu Nevarech Ya, Me'ata V'yad Olam, Me'ata V'yad Olam, Hallelujah. And now, our favorite cantor from Jalisco, cantor from Jalisco, with Hallelujah and Hodu.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, את השם. כל גויים שבחו, שבחו, שבחו. כל האומים יקבר עלינו חסדו. באמת השם ליעולם. הללויה. הודו להשם. יאמר, יאמר, יאמר ישראל, כי לעולם יאמרו, יאמרו, יאמרו נא, יאמרו אהרון, כי לעולם יאמרו, יאמרו נא, יראי השם, כי לעולם חסדו. הללו, הללו את השם. כל גויים שבחו, שבחו, שבחו. כל האומים יקבר עלינו חסדו. חסדו באמת השם ליעולם. הללויה. הודו לשם איתו. לעולם חסדו. יאמר, יאמר, יאמר יאמר ישראל, כי לעולם חסדו. יאמרו, יאמרו, יאמרו נא, יאמרו נא בית אהרון, כי לעולם חסדו. יאמרו, יאמרו, יאמרו נא, יראי השם, כי לעולם
now Psalm 118, continuing. Odecha ki anitani. I put the words in English here on the side, English lettering.
Odecha ki anitani, vatihi li lishua. Odecha ki anitani, vatihi li lishua. Even masu habonim, hayta lerosh pina. Even masu habonim, hayta lerosh pina. Meit Adonai, hayta zot, hini flat v'einenu. Meit Adonai, hayta zot, hini flat v'einenu. Ze hayom asa Adonai, nagila v'nismecha bo. Ze hayom asa Adonai, nagila v'nismecha bo. Ana Adonai, Hoshiana. Ana Adonai, Hoshiana. Ana Adonai, Hatzlichana. Ana Adonai, Hatzlichana. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, berachnuchem mibeit Adonai. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, berachnuchem mibeit Adonai. El Adonai vaya'er lanu, Yisru chag ba'avotim ad karnot hamizbeach. El Adonai vaya'er lanu, Yisru chag ba'avotim ad karnot hamizbeach. Eliata ve'odeka, Elohai aromemeka. Eliata ve'odeka, Elohai aromemeka. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasdo. Yadadai, 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 yadadai,
Okay, and wrap up the last verse of the Hallel, Baruch Atah Adonai, Emulah Batish Bachot. I thank you, Marcelo, for getting me back in line there. Let me pull up back to the beginning to where we are. Okay, we go. Okay, and so this is Rosh Chodesh, and I still have to get to the Rambam, and so we have a long Hallel. I'm going to come into my reading, and I maybe actually double or do just a little bit part of the theme today, and then follow up next week. So we're back to Rabbi Yossi. I may even just stop with that one, because the other two are very deep statements in and of themselves also. Property rights, very important in Jewish thinking. Your neighbor's property should be as precious to you as your own property. In other words, you respect his property. You watch for his property. He has worked for his property. He has struggled and sweated for his property. We're going to make this time to people gain property by hard toil, not by theft, not according to the theories of the early anarchists of the last century said that all property is praton, all property is theft. No, property becomes what someone has earned. There are people who gain it by theft. Most people work hard for their daily living and to build up what they have. Therefore, you must respect the other's property. The rabbis had another statement in the same theme. Chaviv, mamano shel tzaddik yoter migufo. That a tzaddik actually worries more about his property than even his own life. Why? Because if he protects his property, he will not depend on others. We are trying to build human beings who can support themselves. We extend a hand, our obligation. If your brother is falling, you extend a hand. But the ideal goal, as Rambam says, is to help someone be self-sustaining. And that is what's behind this, right? So we protect the other's property. It's not just property. When people sometimes say, well, it's not just property. You know, property is the result of sweat and effort. And so we try to respect property. We want everybody to be able to make property, reasonable amount of property. Everybody doesn't have to be rich as Midas or Korach in the Jewish phrasing. They should have some things that are their own. They can live comfortably. This is what's behind it. So we go with our Torah reading, with our Kaddish to Rabbanan together. Yitkadal, Yitkadash Shemei Rabba, V'yama Divrach Yirutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, V'yamechon, V'chayei Dechon Beit Yisrael, V'argalav V'argivim Amen, V'hei Shmei Rabban Borach, V'yolam Maya, V'barach, V'yishtabach, V'yipa'ar, V'yitama V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yitale, V'yithal Shmei Dekudsha B'richu, Eila Mikol Birchata V'shirata, Tush B'chata V'nechemata, Namrim Be'amavim Ra'amein, Al Yisrael V'al Ramanan, V'al Tamidehon, V'al Kol Tamidei Tamidehon, Command Oskim B'Oraita, Di B'Avda Hadem B'Di B'Chol Ata V'Ata, Elahon V'Lachon, Ayin Arichem Zan Erbichem, V'Korim V'Korim V'Bohon Di B'Shmaya B'Ra'amein, Yesh Lomar Rabba Min Shemaya B'Chayim, Aleinu V'Akoyse B'Ra'amein, Ose Shalom B'Ra'amav, Kuyase Shalom Aleinu V'Akoyse B'Mru. Amen. And this Shabbat service brought to you by Hollywood Temple Bethel, your local and international congregation. We appreciate your support and help. PayPal temple at htbel.org, or you can send in old-fashioned paper checks to our physical address. That's also good. And with that, we're going to continue with our Torah reading. Open the ark, our figurative ark. Continue. Let me get my page down. That's right. Together. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai ve'ein kemasecha. Machutcha machut kol olamim. V'mshaltecha b'chodor v'ador. Adonai melech. Adonai malach. Adonai yimloch. Le'olam va'ed. Adonai oz lamo yitain. Adonai varech. Et amo b'shalom. Av harachamim. Etiv avitzoncha et Zion. Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim. Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim. Ki v'cha leva batachnu melech Aaron ben Isa. Adon Olahamim. Ki ben Saron vayomer Moshe. Uma Adonai. V'chutzu oivecha v'yanusu misanecha miponecha. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Udevar Adonai. Mi Yerushalayim. Baruch Shenatan Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah. Le'amo Yisrael. Mikedush Hato. All right, we continue with the prayer before the ark. Elishmei Kadisha Yakira Ana Amatush Bechan Be'anara Chetz Velishmei Kadisha Yakira Ana Amatush Bechan Yeherava Kadama Etiftach Libi Beoraita Betashlim Mishalim Delibi Beliba Dechol Amach Yisrael Letavu Chayin Velishlam Amen. And we recite after each other. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai Kadosh Shemo.
Gadolur Adonai Iti, Neramem Hashemo Yachdav. Lecha Adonai Hagedol Hagevor V'Atiferet V'Netzach V'Hod Ki Chov Hashamayim U'Va'aretz Ki Chov Hashamayim U'Va'aretz Lecha Adonai V'Mitnaseh L'Chol Rosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'Yishtachavu L'Adam Ragav Kadoshu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'Yishtachavu L'Har Kadosh Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. All right, and now we are at our Torah reading. We are in the portion of Mishpatim. Before I get to that, I'd like to announce last week I told you we had our newest grandson, but I didn't give you the name.
Yeah.
It's Jewish tradition to do the name at the bris. So the bris was, thank God, was yesterday. Went through in fine colors with the oil to the stars, Rabbi Leibovitz. And his name is officially Lev, from the word heart.
Oh, Lev.
Tov, a good heart.
Yeah.
But now that is number 9 in our little gang.
Well, Mazel Tov.
Huh?
Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tov.
Okay. So Torah portion. Joe Ben Lulu is going to read the reading for us. I'm going to give just a brief introduction. We are in Mishpatim. Mishpatim has, in brief, both religious and civil codes in it. Many of these are repeated in different variations in other parts of the Torah. And the rabbis say each variation comes to include another nuance to it. But here we have the importance of civil society, we may say. And it starts with the rules of how does one treat a slave. And the example of slavery given is that of indentured servant. limit to the bondage, set free, is given a gift for going away. Only if he refuses to go and so on, then he dedicates himself to be a servant for life. His ear is pierced, and the rabbis say it's an insult for wanting to be a slave. The female is set on a different basis. She's married, and if the husband who would take her does not treat her, does not take her as the wife with all the values of the wife, or she actually refuses, she has the right to refuse. In those cases, she is gone, goes free, right? Different conditions. This idea of the indentured servant actually went on, or slavery is still in existence. Mauritania, country in West Africa, only now, in the last year or so, actually outlawed slavery and actually clamped down on slavery. Theoretically, it was outlawed, but it was done, and it's only now clamping down. In India, 70 years after independence of India, only now it turns out that there's been ongoing slavery in southern India of what's called the Dalit, the untouchables, where they are indebted to work for somebody for the upper class at no pay. They get, at the end of the year, they get a few rupees, and that's it, and some food. That's it. They finally now outlawed it. Right? So this fight against slavery is something that's been going on and on. It is part and endemic to human society. It's not a white European sin. It is a sin of all humanity. And the struggle of humanity is the struggle of gaining human freedom from oppression over the generations. A slow battle, but increasingly. So that root is there in the root of the rights of the slave. And then it continues about questions of property theft, responsibility. Where we are going to is about responsibility for damages, where your property, talks about, your animal, for example, going in another's ox, your sheep grazing in another's field. In this verse, you're responsible for the damages done, compensation from the best of your field or vineyard to compensate, right? You have to give fair compensation for the damage your property has done, right? Rules of obligation. You have a dog. Dog goes into the other guy's yard, tears up the flower patch. You have the obligation, right? So there we have the beginnings of these social obligations. Fire. You burn a fire on your front yard. Okay, you're burning your leaves. The leaves catch and go and burn the neighbor's house. You have responsibility, right? Where you say, I didn't intend to do it, but you created a situation, right? So we have this obligation. We are responsible for situations that we create where there's damage done without intention of damage, but we've made the situation possible, right? And that's with tort law today and the civil law, right? Companies create a product. They don't intend to create a product that's bad, but if the product was bad and they didn't test it properly, then they're liable. Of course, the other side of the coin is if it's like Gorilla Glue and you use it on your hair without reading the label, you're liable, right? All right. So, but again, the same idea. You have something, it goes out, does damage. You have the liability, and then we continue into the reading we have, which is the question of when you leave someone with your neighbor, right? And what are the categories? You leave someone, do me a favor, watch my cow. The second version, you leave something with a neighbor and you say, here's $10 to watch my cow. Third version, your neighbor comes to me and says, can I borrow your cow? Fourth version is you pay your neighbor to rent the cow, right? The neighbor borrows without pay, the neighbor borrows with paying, right? So all these different categories of responsibility of property lead to a whole extended discussion in the Talmud and latest codes. What is my responsibility when I have somebody else's property in my possession? When I'm being paid, when I'm not being paid, when I'm doing it as a favor, when I'm renting it, when he's paying me to do the job. All right, all of these things have different levels of responsibility, and the code, the basis is found here in this code, as I say. Okay, so those are key elements of our reading. Joe, senior, do our blessings, and Joe Younger, you'll do the reading.
Rabbi,
go ahead.
I have a question. how there is a lot of civil laws here. How are they ordered? Is there any reason in the way that the laws are written? Any way that they are ordered?
That's a very good question about the organization of things. They're in groups. The laws of slave man, indentured servant male, and female go together. Then you've got laws of theft, which go together with laws of physical damage to a person, right? So they're blocked. This one, the laws of responsibility of property are in blocks. The laws of eye for eye, tooth for tooth go together with example questions of two men are struggling, a woman's injured in the middle, has a miscarriage. What happens if the tooth is injured, right? So they're going in blocks. So they're put in blocks. And then after that, there's a block of laws about holidays also. So, is it structured the way we have in mind? No, they probably may not be the entirety also of the ancient laws that the people of Israel had, but as it's put together, perhaps it was decided we're going to highlight these and only place these, not everything that we have in our law codes. And so we have other, in Vayikra, we have some of these, and later on in Barim, we have some of these. So what we do know is that these codes are very familiar with the codes of Hammurabi and of the Babylonians as Lipitishta. There are quite a few series of law codes. They know these, and that they are changing the law codes that they have from the other societies. And for example, adding liability for murder to the liability of murder goes not just on people of the same rank, but it makes no difference when there's a noble or a slave. If the noble kills the slave, the noble is liable. If slave kills the noble, it's the person is guaranteed equal justice, which is, and that may be why they're highlighting certain ones to distinguish the we may call it the Jewish revolution of law from law as it was assumed. Law as it was assumed was to protect the rights of the noble and of the society was very stratified. It's to protect the rights of the noble and of the middle class, above the serf class, above the slave class. Here, we're looking at breaking some of these class stratifications, and it may be why some of these are put in the order they're put, or the emphasis that they're put. So that's maybe the best way to explain. We're going to go ahead. Okay, Joe Senior, the blessing.
Okay. Baruch Hu es Adonai HaMavarach.
Baruch
Baruch Hanam Baruch Loilam Voed. Baruch Adonai HaMelech Olam. Asher B'chabonim Mikol U'amim. V'natan lanu es Torusoi. Baruch Ato Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Go ahead, Joe. Yeah.
Amen. כי יעביר איש שדה או חרם ושילח את בעירו וביר בשדה אחר מיטב השדה הוא ומיטב כרמו ישלם כי תצא אש ומצאה קוצים ננחל גדיש או הקמה או השדה שלם ישלם המעביר את הבעירה כי ייתן איש על רעהו כסף וכלים לשמור וגונב מבית האיש, אם ימצא הגנב ישלם שניים, אם לא ימצא הגנב ונקרב בעל הבית אל האלוהים, אם לא שלח ידו במלאכת רעהו, על כל דבר פשע, על שור, על חמור, על שלמה, על כל אבדה, אשר יאמר כי הוא זה, עד האלוהים יבוא דבר שניהם, אשר ירשיון אלוהים ישלם שניים לרעהו, כי ייתן איש הרעהו חמור או שור עושה, וכל בהמה לשמור או מת, או נשבר אין רואה, שבועת אדוני תהיה בין שניהם אם לא שלח ידו במלאכת רעהו ולקח בעלה ולא ישלם ואם גנוב יגנב מאמו ישלם לבעליו אם טרף יטרף יביאו עד הטרפה לא ישלם.
Okay, thank you. But one other thought in terms of structure. This is what's called casuistic law. In other words, it's case law. Rather than giving an overall theory of the law and then break down step. That is like the Napoleon codes. The rabbinic or biblical thinking is I'm giving you examples. Out of the examples, you'll find here and there summations, like you shall pay 3 times or 5 times, or eye for an eye. But most of it is done as in this case shall be this, in this case shall be this. And it is up to us then to determine what is the implication, right? To infer out of the case what is the general ruling, rather than a general ruling, then breaking down the cases from it. All right, so that's also different. That's also what's behind the structure. All right, so now we go ahead. We have also a special haftarah today, a special maftar, because we actually have 2. We have Rosh Chodesh and we have Kitisa. So I'm going to just read the opening of Kitisa first, and then we'll do the prayer for those who are ill. And right here, and I put it up for you, it's from chapter 30 of Exodus. And it is just before the story of the golden calf. It talks about counting the children of Israel and bringing the half a shekel. And this brings us to this portion, which is portion of shekalim. And we get this name because we are in the beginning of the month of Adar. This gives us a month and a half before Pesach. And so we begin to collect money, the shekalim, for the maintenance of the temple. In a month and a half, everything has to be nice and polished because you're going to have 1 million people there celebrating Pesach together. And so this leads off a series of special Shabbatot as tie in between Purim and Pesach. So this is Ki Tisa. Vaydaber no Moshe lemor Ki Tisad Rosh Bnei Yisrael Kudehem Natnu Ish Kofer Nafshel Noit Bifkod Otam Behem Negef Bifkod Otam Zeyitnu Kol Halver Kudim Machzit HaShekel B'Shekel Kodesh Asirim Gera HaShekel Machzit HaShekel Truma Ladon Nahari. Right, command to give a half shekel for each individual. We weren't going to count people, but we counted the half shekel. We could know then how many able-bodied adult males we have. And the word that's used is kofer nefesh, which means an atonement for one's life. So that you would not count the census itself because that was opening for plague, but by doing this, one was absolved of that. That's one thought. But also, these are all people from 20 and above. Well, who's age 20 and above? Military. Military age was 20, not 18, but 20. And so obviously we are looking at who is our fighting force, and hence counting the males. But fighting force means the potential of war, which means the potential of death. And so there is this sense of collecting as a, we may say, an advance on redemption from danger. You may have that in mind also. But for us, in all centuries, it is this way of announcing that Pesach is coming upon us in a month and a half. So a month and a half to bake our matzah. And now let us go and pray for those who are ill. And page over a little bit here. There we go. Let me put this down. We pray for those who are ill. Mishaberach, Chavatenu B'Ham Yosef Yaakov, Asher Sadu May the Holy One who bless our Esther's, Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Becca, Rich, and Leah, bless and heal Esther, Elisheva, Pinchas, Peter Skovsky, Miriam, Leah Dorf, Yasef Ben Galina, Moisey Kelchik, Mindy Levins Pfeiffer, Jennifer Levins, Ronnie Duran, Harriet Levins, Moisey Ben Manya, Barbara Mormon, Esther Gerson, Jeffrey Buck, Joe Alexander, Robert Drato, Roger Rosen, Rachel Flalo, Jenny Drato, Michael Schinder, Susan Tuchman, Shirley Marco, Fira Feinberg, Judy Alkali, Richard Zeller, Levin Masha Ben Sarah, Louis Jacobs, Jason, and the mother of Cantor Bodai, Miriam Bat Yitzchak Bechanum, Liba Batsara, Hannah Batsara, Eliyahu Ben Chana, her Mormon, Irina Sepian, Shoshana Batsara, Hannah Saralea Bat Rachel, Hannah Sar Bat Kayla Alta, Alan Whalen, Hayanesi, Sophie, the friend of Judy Alkaline, all those afflicted by the COVID-19 virus. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishlach lehem nefesh ufut haguf. May the Holy One send them healing both in body and in mind to them and the whole house of Israel. Let's all say Amen.
Amen.
And we pray. Let's join in our prayers together with Mishneh Torah. We'll sing it together here. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me add names. I forgot. I'm going to apologize. I
Yeah.
ran ahead.
Can I say the name of the
Yes,
people?
please do it.
Okay,
Thank you for stopping me.
My dear friend Olga Bat Simcha
Olga Bat Simcha.
and Thaddeus Ben Avraham Shimon.
Thaddeus Ben Avram Shimon.
I have one too. It's Rachel Bat Martha.
Rachel Bat Martha.
Thank you.
David Mordcha Ben Yehuda Noah.
David Mordcha Ben Yehuda Noah.
Sima Harlev. Ron Ter Harlev.
Ron Ter Harlev.
Susan Feinberg.
Susan Feinberg.
Sharon Lipman.
Sharon Lipman.
Esther Rachel Batsiva.
Esther Rachel Batsiva.
Laban Moshe Ben Sarah.
Laban Moshe Ben Sarah.
And Howden Ben Lazar.
Ben Lazar.
And Karo Sekti.
Karo Sekti.
Ronald Rothman.
Ronald Rothman.
Gabi and Tito Gorodisha.
Gabi and Tito Gorodisha.
Rachel Bat Ventura.
Rachel Bat Ventura. Jeff, go ahead.
Wendy Keller.
Wendy Keller. And any other names?
Emily Batsara.
Emily Batsara. Okay, and so all of them, we have them in our minds and in our hearts. Now let's join in singing together our prayers and wishes. Mishneh Torah Avotenu Mikoha Bracha Limotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishneh Torah Avotenu Mikoha Bracha Limotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, full of spirit, and let us say Amen. Amen. And now for the Haftarah, also in this theme of Shabbat Shkalim, special one, it is taken from the actual account where the temple has been rededicated and purified under the reign of King Yehoash, who comes to power after the Phoenician prince Athaliah, or Queen Athaliah, is deposed. And she's the daughter of Jezebel from the north, right, who was also deposed. And a young, put on the throne at the age of 7, and then as he gains full age, he gives instructions to restore the temple, clean it, and collect the shkalim once again to use for the funds to rededicate the temple. And hence that's the association for our Torah portion. So I'll just read from the few verses from here. Ben Sheva Shanim Yoash Be'Marko Bishnat Sheva LeYehu Malach Yoash Ba'arim Shana Malach B'Yerushalayim B'Shem Imot Tzviya Mi'Be'er Shava Vayaz Yoash Hayashar Ben Adonai Kol Yamav Asher Rohu Yoyada HaKohen Raka Bamot Lo Saru Od HaMizabchim Mikatrim Babamot Vayaz Yoash Hayashar Ben Adonai Kol Yamav Asher Rohu Yoyada HaKohen Raka Vayome Yoash El HaKohanim Kol Kesef HaGarushim Asher Yevar Beit Adonai Kesef Ish Kesef Nafshot Eko Kol Kesef She'ale Alev Ish Lavi Beit Adonai, Yikchu Lehem Kohanim, Ish Meit Makaro, V'im Yachzku, Berek Habayit L'Kol Asher, Imatzei Sham Badek. And the beautiful thing in it is that they collect the funds and they actually have no more room to put the money in the fund box. And that's success. So fundraising story for us also. But Habayit to support and help to keep us going also. Right? That's one of the themes for this as well for congregations and communities from Shekalim. We go ahead now. Close this, and go back here, and go now to prayer for our country. And this is, we're on the eve of President's Day. And so, of course, it is a crossover between both Washington and Lincoln's birthday, and then all the other presidents. So I have two readings, one from Washington and one from Lincoln. One from Washington, which is to us as Jews, very important. Because he said, for happily the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens, giving it on all occasions their effectual support. While everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid. May the Father of all mercies scatter light and not darkness in our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here, and in his own due time and way, everlastingly happy. And this from Lincoln's second inaugural address. I've varied the words a little bit, but the main thing, I sort of adapted it for our sense, is after the devastating, or in the midst of the devastating civil war, it is wrapping up when he gives his second inaugural address, and now he needs to set the nation back on a path of healing. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, care for those who shall have borne the battle against this disease and for their family, do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves, with all nations. Amen. Notice I put in the word disease for this one, adapted it for us, but also the national malady that we have of being unable to talk with each other. People are shut down, people are shouted down, people are standing up in arms, one side and the other side. And we need this malice towards none to keep us together. Okay. And then we go ahead for the people of Israel, also our prayers for them. They're beginning to round the corner on the battle with the virus. The rates are suddenly finally starting to go down. Very good news, the results from the first set of vaccinations, those people who got the second shot, not only have they been well protected against the vaccine, they are far less likely to transmit it. And this is very significant because that means that indeed is going to create the herd immunity that is so valuable and important. So between people getting herd immunity because the virus itself is spreading and those who are being immune, the ability to slow down and to control this pandemic is within reach. So we pray for the people in the state of Israel. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. So Yisrael v'galo Borech et Medinat Yisrael Reshit Gvulatenu. Again Alecha Bevrat Chazdecha Ufros Alecha Sukat Shlomecha Shlachacha V'amicha Moshe Asareh V'yotzecha Name Takne Beitzah Tova Milfanecha. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. Deliver them and crown their efforts with triumph. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. To Yisrael V'galo. Bless our land with peace, O God. Inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. To Yisrael V'galo. Borech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmicha Gvulatenu. Again Alecha Bevrat Chazdecha Ufros Alecha Sukat Shlomecha V'nomar Amen. V'nomar Amen. Now we're going to return the Torah to the ark, wrap up the service.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Yeah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai.
And okay, all together, and then Mizmor LeDavid, a beautiful melody I'm going to play for us. Yalalu Hashem Adonai, Kines Gav Shemo Levado, Hodo Aleretz V'Shamayim, Vayarem Keren Le'amot, Tehila Lechol Hasidav, Livnei Yisrael, Am Kerovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. And now, LeDavid, this version coming up. There we go. Here we go. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al tazovu et chayim hi lama chazikim ba v'tom meusha deracheha dacheina v'chol netivoteha shalom Ashihi v'heinu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu, Kadesh Yameinu, Kekedem. I apologize. Every once in a while, YouTube takes on a life of its own, takes over, does not obey orders. We go ahead with Enke Eloheinu. Go back to the cantor from Jalisco with Enke Eloheinu.
Oh, yeah. Enke Eloheinu. Moshe Mendelssohn.
Hey, 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 nay, 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 que lo que, hey, canto, nay, hey, que mal que, que lo que, canto, nay, hey, que mal que, no me que mochieno. No de la doneno, no de le mal que
no de
le mochieno. Hey, 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 que lo que no, hey, cato neino, hey, que mal que no, hey, que mochieno, que lo que, mi cato neino, hey, que mal que no, mi que mochieno. Hey, 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 nay, 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 que lo que, hey, gato neino, hey, que mal que no, hey, que mochieno, mi, que lo que, mi gato neino, mi que mal que no, mi que mochieno.
Okay, and we conclude Aleinu together. Aleinu
Aleinu l'shabech
Hakol lo teku lo liotzei breshit shelo haratzot velo zamanu mishpachot hadama shelo samchakenu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim mishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei amlachim hakadosh baruch hu.
אשר
שמיים
בשמיים
יסד
יסד
הארץ,
הארץ,
משה
ומשה
יקרא
יקרא
בשמיים ממעל,
ממעל,
ושכינתו זו
ושכינתו
בגבי מרומי, ואלוהינו אין עוד, הם ממלכנו וחסודתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת יום ואשרתה, אלה בך, כי אדוני הוא אלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחתנו, דיינות ונאמן, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. And continue with as we recall, dear ones no longer with us, those who passed away this season and previous years, the outsides of Marie Goldblatt Jason and Lillian Kufferwas, dear Lillian, our friend, Marcella, your wife, and those who passed away during this year, Harry Kyle and David Swankert, Jack Petsko, all the victims of COVID-19 virus.
And Phyllis Edelston.
What is the name?
Phyllis Edelston.
Phyllis Edelston. Okay, and we'll also keep in mind, not Jewish, but very significant, the late Secretary of State George Shultz, who passed away this week, who was a very great statesman in the best sense of the word. In many ways, this has brought wisdom to foreign policy. So for all of them, we recite the Kaddish. יתקדל שמי רבה, בעמד דברך חירותי, וימליך מלכותי, חייכון ומכון וחי לכל בית ישראל, בגליו זמן פריפים רמים, ישמי רבה מורך לעולם וממיה, יברך וישתבח ויפאר ויזמר ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, ושבחתה ונחמתה, דבריהם ואמר במרומם, יהי שלום רבו מן שמיה בחיים, עלינו והכויסה ברומם, עושה שלום במרומם, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו והכויסה במרו, Amen. And we're going to wrap up now. Hollywood Temple Bethel, your sponsor for this Shabbat and all Shabbatot, give us your due support and help. PayPal, temple@hcbl.org, or paper checks, still acceptable in modern society. You can mail us your credit cards also, if you want to do that. And we continue now with Adon Olam, and this very popular version of Adon Olam. Remember, we're talking about the Rambam. Adon Olam is also a variation of the 13 principles attributed to the Rambam.
Adon Olam
אשר
לך בטרם
כל יציר
את נעשה
וחפץ
כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בדברה אדון הכל יוצא נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא מאחרי כיפות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה הכל עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יצא נברא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא מאחרי כיפות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל נברא עת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי יבלוך הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי כיפות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי כיפות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי כיפות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה
Okay, so with that, I'm going to close down the screen here and close this down. Stop share for a second so we can wave Shabbat Shalom to everybody. I'm going to go into our discussion, which are all online now. And going to go into our topic of the Rambam. Today, we're going to talk about Rambam as a pioneer in Jewish law. And then next session will be about Rambam as a pioneer in philosophy, not just Jewish, but general philosophy. And then after that, the following week, Thursday, the 25th, is Purim in the evening. So I sent emails on the email I sent out. I said, please volunteer. If you know how to tell a punchline, I'll volunteer, send me an email. I'll send you a joke. We'll incorporate it. You can then read it for us rather than me reading the whole thing all the way through. All right. So I have a little breakup. So we'll do a piece of Megillah reading, a piece of humor, a little bit of music, Megillah reading, humor, music. So that will be our Purim. Then the Shabbat after that is Shushan Purim, and it is also my father's yahrzeit. So I'll talk about my father's teachings that are relevant to contemporary politics when he was a student of political science in the University of Vienna, 10 years before the Germans took over, and what he was seeing going on. So we'll talk about that too. So now to go to the Rambam, I'm going to go back to my share screen. And now, okay. Move this out of the way. We're going to look at the Rambam now as the great philosopher of Jewish law. And it's not just philosopher of philosophy, but philosopher of Jewish law. And no way better to understand the impact of him being, and to look at the way other people in the world have looked at him by issuing stamps. Didn't think about it. I figured Israel certainly would have a stamp in his honor. And here's an example of a stamp. Israel, it says it's like a commemorative stamp rather than a postage stamp. No amount on it. It's the Congress Haben-Leumi LeToldot Hamada, the International Congress for Science Studies, the history of science. And so for this International Congress, Rambam was the theme. Okay, well, how about the Grenadines, which is, it was the little island that President Reagan invaded, Grenadines, in the Caribbean. Well, on the 40th anniversary of the United Nations, 1985, it also coincided with the 850th anniversary of the birth of Maimonides and the World Health Organization. They put the stamp of the World Health Organization together with the picture of the Rambam as their stamp. Right? Very appropriate. Where did I go? Oh, there we go. And then here, Lesotho, in the same period, also 40th anniversary of the United Nations, also put Maimonides, again, because it was his 850th birthday, or presumed birthday, nobody can tell exactly, and put his picture. And again, a picture of the United Nations symbol together with it. Very, very appropriate. And then we go to Sierra Leone, country in West Africa, and issued what we call a collector's plate, stamped with the Rambam, and in the footsteps of Maimonides, and here a copy in the background from Fez to Cordoba, Fez, Cairo to Jerusalem, because that's where by tradition he ended up and then was buried in Tveria. This one from Dominica, again, the Caribbean, with a quotation from Maimonides. May peace be with you and with the other scholars and all the common people. Right? Beautiful prayer from Maimonides. I'm not sure where that's taken from, but they put a picture here of a Jewish scholar with a scroll on his laps. We can down his lap. And then we go ahead here. Micronesia. Micronesia, very small. It's a chain of very tiny islands in the South Pacific, north of Australia, north of New Guinea and Papua. Again, on the occasion, I guess, 1138, the birth, using 1138 as the date, and on that occasion marking it. Further down on this list, the Republic of Guinea, also a country in West Africa, showing a picture of the Rambam, a picture of Jews leaving in exile, the gates, Cordova, the gate of the Jewish quarter. And interesting that they show this looks like Jewish refugees, exiles, because Rambam was exiled out of Cordoba. They had to flee. And finally, the last one, Mozambique. Rambam, this one from 2009, and there's some kind of notation I cannot make out, commemoration of something. The picture, imaginative picture with a copy of what may have been an illustrated manuscript from one of his works, just the letter Aleph I can make out here. All right, just as I say, what better tribute than seeing that stamps are issued in the name of someone who lived so long ago and still his writings have an impact till today. Little other historic aside, in Jewish circles, Rambam has always been a controversial figure. So I look at my wife's family, they're from Yemen. And the Rambam was very close, or let's say the Jews of Yemen were very close to the Rambam. They had gone through a period of suffering where, like in Spain, they had come under the rule of an oppressive regime. A Shiite regime had taken over. The Shiites are always generally tougher towards Jews than were the Sunni. You certainly see that in Iran today. And well, not everywhere, but it was certainly in Yemen. And so they felt oppressed, and at the same time, someone arose who claimed to be the Messiah. And so they wrote to the Rambam, he says, please give us guidance. And he opens up a beautiful letter, magnificent letter, in which he says, you are a wise and knowledgeable community. You have preserved for us ancient records, right? They were known as preserving documents. They had that tradition and reputation. So, and he tells them, this is not the Messiah, you stand strong and steadfast, and it helped the community survive. So they adopted his teachings, and they made him their rabbi. Centuries later, the Jewish community began to be influenced by the Kabbalists of Safed and started adopting Sephardic traditions from the Shulchan Aruch. And so one of my wife's ancestors at that time, in the 1600s, known as Maharitz, the Rabbi Yechia Saleh, pardon my typing, mistyped there, Saleh established the Mishneh Torah, reestablished it as the authority for the Yemenite Jews, and reestablished the traditional prayer book of the Yemenites, which was based on the guidance of the Mishneh Torah as the authoritative prayer book. And then Kabbalah kept on as an influence, and just as in East Europe, the great rabbis recognized that the Kabbalah was leading Jews astray. We like Kabbalah today, very popular, but we forget that it had blinded Jews to progress, and basically threw Jews on the basis of emotion rather than reason. As one of the drawbacks in Hasidism, as much as I like it, because it roots itself in Kabbalah. And going back 2 centuries ago in Europe, and also in the Eastern Europe, in the Mizrahi communities, Arabic and Muslim communities, also recognition we have to return to the rational roots of Judaism. So, as my wife's uncle's grandfather is a man who starts a revolution in Yemen, as Rabbi Kafich, denounced the Zohar as a forgery. He's the first man to in modern times to write a systematic attack on the Zohar as a forgery. It's been later on supported by later research. Reintroduced the primacy of the Rambam in Halakha for the Yemenite Jews, and brought into Yemen the study of modern science. Students in his day would learn geometry, math, basis of science. Right? That was the revolution. Now, it was a bitter fight. The other rabbis tried to have him put under cherem. They wrote to Rav Kook in Israel, says, stop this man. And Rav Kook in Israel said, no, this is a legitimate position. You cannot try to condemn him. So till today, some Jews don't talk to each other from that among Yemenite Jews. Well, that's nothing new. Well, let's go to his foundations as a scholar of Halakha. He opens his Mishneh Torah. I talked about it, that he's going to make a completely different approach, right? Marcel asked a question about organization. Jews operated in thinking on a casuistic basis. Give me a case, and I'll expand it. From the expansion of the case, I'll come to my conclusion. Rather, he is now going to a codex base. I'm going to set things in a systematic policy. Then out of the system, we can derive our specific cases. So he's the first one to create a theology of halakha also. Till then, theology and midrash had always been separated and studied separately from halakha. Halakha is very specific and precise, whereas our thinking style is wide open, wild. That's the way we like it as Jews. He wants to bring the two together, and he is an Aristotelian in his thinking, and logic has to guide us. So he's the first one to create an opening of Jewish law on the basis of faith. So it starts, the foundation of all foundations, the firmest pillar of all wisdom is to know that there is a first being. Right? This is Aristotelian, first being. He caused all beings to be. And all beings from heaven and earth from between them could not be saved for the truth of his own being, right? It is out of this prime mover that all else exists. Because if we think backwards, every action is a result of another action. Going back and back and back, well, there has to be the first mover that initiates that first action. And that is, by definition, God. So that is that kind of Greek thing. Thus, supposing is not, none else could have been called into existence. If there was no God, there would be nothing. Because all existence has to be grounded in something. So that something is God. Conversely, though, supposing all other beings, say if he alone were non-existent, his being alone remains, right? So God exists not dependent on the material universe. If nothing else was, God would be. He does not cease to be because of non-existence. All beings dependent upon him. He, blessed is he, not dependent upon them. single one of them, the truth of his being incomparable truth of any other individual being, right? This is a foundation of all truths. Later, I guess, a philosopher like Sartre would use the term of God. It's an entity in itself, of itself, completely self-sufficient and aware of its own existence, as opposed to the human being, which is of himself, aware of himself, and matter, which is of itself but not aware of itself. Right? That's and so here, modern philosopher really following on the kind of philosophical thread of thought. And none like unto him, no other true being besides like unto him. Notice now he's taking a philosophical thread and making it a foundation of Jewish law. Then he goes on the idea, and again, this is going from pre-Newtonian physics. Being is the God of the universe who guides the spheres with an infinite force, right? Again, we think back to the structure of the universe, shells around shells around shells, right? Now, we do know now that if we go to the subatomic structure, it is shells upon shells upon shells. It is the foundation of matter. But in the Ptolemaic universe, it's the Earth at the center and shells around it. But these shells of spheres move constantly. Constant motion is impossible without the force moving it. And God would be the force that moves it. In other words, God, again, what the medievals would say, causa in fere. There's causa in esse, that's the creating cause. Causa in fere is the cause that makes things continue. Now, we know from Newton that that's no longer accepted, but this would be, again, applying physics to the Rambam, to halacha. So with this, then, belief is a mitzvah, right? You must, it's a command. From the 10 Commandments that we read last week, the opening line says, I am the Lord your God, right? We understand it as a preamble. He says, no, it is a command, right? Whoever supposes there's another God violates a prohibitive commandment because it says no other gods and is an atheist, denying the great principle and everything else depends on. All right, and then following in is halacha. You can see. This is the English translation to the Hebrew. The Hebrew is very clean, but very tight Hebrew. So the English is trying to keep that tightness and terseness, right? So you must assume the logical necessity of one incorporeal God, right? God is one, neither two nor more than two. Oh, who's putting him on the spot now? Neither two would be Zoroastrian thinking, Mandean thinking, Manichaean thinking. There are two forces in the universe: force of light, force of darkness, force of good, force of evil, force of God, force of Satan. No, there is no such two forces, no more than two, which would put out the idea of Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Nor more than three or four, which would be polytheism, right? But one whose unity, there's no comparison among the individual universe. This idea of one, when it says Shema Yisrael, God is one, and he refers to that, it is not a mathematical entity of one. It's got to be different from any other concept of one. Not like the unit of a genus, which embraces many of it, right? You call it like dogs. There's a group. They all are a bunch of dogs. Each one is the individual. That's a group, genus. No, this would not be a group of gods, like the gods, which is the way the ancients will talk about all the forces of God in the universe, the gods. No, as a collective. No, not a collective. Not the unit of a body, which is divisible into parts and particles, right? The Rambam will attack the idea that those who would say, my hand, God speaks, my hand, my right arm, these are merely figures of speech, not an actual entity. To us, we assume that's true, but in the ancient times, it was not obvious. Rambam is making it obvious. The rabbis in the Midrash begin to make it obvious. Some of the prophets make it obvious, but not everybody understood it as such. Supposing that there are many deities is equivalent to an admission that they are corporeal. Because if you have many deities, they have to have distinctions between them. If you have a distinction, there's a demarcation. So then there has to be a material divide between them. If there's a Zeus and the Hera and Juno and the Venus, there has to be demarcations between them. You've given them physicality. You've limited them. So if you suppose the creator to be corporeal and material with force conclusion, he is finite. Well, if God is a body, then he's finite. He has a limit. Because all things corporeal have an extension and a limit. But God would be infinite and uninterrupted. And in truth, the universe functions forever. The universe functions forever as an output of God, which is endless. So power is positively not a physical power, right? Even that which we call power of God is nothing from the physical universe. Not like heat, light, gravity. And because incorporeal, none of the chance traits of bodies, so as to be divisible or an offshoot of something else, can be attributed to him. This is, by the way, I'm not sure if he's thinking of it this sense. He knows, he's familiar with some of these thinkings that become part of Kabbalistic thought. The idea that you have emanations out of God that have different functions. It's also Neoplatonic thinking. It is Gnostic thinking. No, you cannot have that either. So the idea of the Esosphirot in Rambam's thinking would be a violation. All right? Would be a violation because we're trying to attach entities to God that cannot be attached. So therefore, it's impossible to be but one, and the command is from Shema, right? You know, right? So here he's teaching us. Okay. What we're going to do is use science. We're going to go back to science. Right? You want the truth is in the science. And he goes to the science of his day. It's a Ptolemaic science, right? Not Copernican or Galilean, but we got it here. Celestial spheres called heaven, firmament, habitation, nebulae. And it talks about 9 spheres, the moon, the sun, Mercury, Venus, and so on. All of the controlling spheres, the sphere is transparent, right? This is, again, he's using science of his day. Some are small stars, Earth is bigger. Some are large stars, bigger than the Earth, right? They're able to take some measurements. The Earth is bigger than the moon about 40 times. It's not, it's about only 4 times. But again, he's trying to use measurements using the equipment that is known in his day. Sun is bigger than the Earth 170 times. There, apparently, he's not so far off in the count. And consequently, the moon is approximately 1/68,000th part of the sun by that math. All right, it's not that smaller, but it's smaller, right? So, among the stars, no star bigger than the sun, none smaller than the star in the second sphere. It would be Mercury, it would be the smallest of the stars. At least of this universe as he knows it in his day. Okay. Not bad, given that he's relying not on his own, he's relying on what is known science of his day. And then a Pythagorean element in it. All the stars and spheres are beings endowed with a soul, intelligence, and understanding. Right? Pythagoras was one of the famous ones who said that the heavenly elements all are engaged in there's a song in the universe. There's music in the universe, right? There's an intelligence in even the universal forces have an intelligence, and their function to whatever their purpose is, right? The angels, the spheres, then the human. Again, here going from the Greeks, the elements, right? 4 elements: fire, air, water, and earth. That's Aristotle, maybe others also. But basically, when I say these, we're talking modern forms of fire is the heat, light energy. Air is all gases. Water would be liquids. Earth would be solids, right? Those are the basic forms of matter plus energy. Those are the elements of all creatures beneath the expanse, man, beast, fowl, right? We all, minerals, precious structures, we all are part of that same basic elements of the universe. All bodies, okay. All the bodies are joint matter and form. This is out of medieval philosophy. All things are extension and matter, right? So everything there is a combination of these 4 elements. All right, it's again, he's relying on the science of his day. We're going to operate, and now, what's important, he's breaking us again away from magical thinking. It's the nature of, and to some extent also away from miraculous thinking. He's telling us not to expect miracles. Why? It's the nature of fire and air to go up from the center of the earth towards the center, nature of water and earth to go below towards the center, not due to intelligence, not due to desire, but to a rule fixed in them and to nature which was engendered in them. The rabbis in the Midrash, the Talmudic period, and Mishnah period already understand this. They make reference to this, that Olam K'Nogo Noheg. There are certain policies upon which the universe operates. But he is now making it very explicit. Do not expect up to be down, down to be up. All right, and because there are elements for all bodies, it's found each and every body, whether man, beast, animal, fowl, plant, and so on, is uniform matter, unformed matter, a fusion of water, fire, air, water, and earth. All that exists is a fusion of these entities, and therefore operates under the laws of nature. Very important. Don't expect things to suddenly happen out of order. Right? So he's giving us faith, theology. Okay.
You can answer this or read it. We have the same dates that we got you last.
Hold on. Okay. There we go. Okay. He's a physician and a psychologist. So he goes on to discuss human behavior, individual and social behavior, medicine and psychology, and the freedom of the individual to make choices of good or evil. And emphasizes the need to attain what's called the middle path. We talk about the Shvila Zahav in modern Hebrew, golden mean, it's taken from Greeks also. Shvila Emtsai, the middle path. So, what makes us behave as we behave? To the physically sick, the bitter tastes sweet, and the sweet tastes bitter. Among the sick, there may be one who craves and desires food which is unfit for consumption, for example, dirt and coal. We've seen that. We know this in psychology, that people will eat and grab dirt as a compulsion, and despises good food such as bread and meat, or they go and eat junk food like Twinkies all day, right? According to the seriousness of the disease. Even so are people whose souls are sick, right? So from the physical example of human behavior with eating, he goes to other actions of psychology. People's souls are sick, people who have obsessions, compulsions, psychotic episodes. They desire and love the evil tendencies and hate the good way and are lazy to follow it, for it becomes a very heavy load upon them in proportion to their ailment. So in other words, they're fighting these dispositions. It is easier to give in than to fight it. So says Isaiah of these people, woe to those who say that of the evil it is good and the good is evil. Put darkness for light and light for darkness. Put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And respecting their like, it says, who leave the path of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness. In other words, that the tendency of the human to commit sins is a consequence of an imbalance, psychological imbalance. And you have to fight that imbalance. So what's the corrective measure for the sick soul, for the soul sick? Let them go to wise doctors of the souls, and they'll heal the disease with tendencies wherein they will instruct until they bring them back to the right way. They that are conscious of the evil and tendencies and do not go to the wise to be cured by them, of them said Solomon, wisdom and instruction of fools alone despise. In other, you know you have a tendency to something that's destructive, ruinous to yourself, ruinous to others. You by yourself may not be able to deal with it, but you know that there's someone you can go to. If you refuse to go, then you're liable, right? You need someone to work with you, right? He's telling people, you go to the shrink, go to your rabbi. Don't just sit there and continue in the destructive path. And his approach, those of you who study psychology, one of the great figures in psychology of the last century was B.F. Skinner, who went from Pavlov's dogs and went the other way around. It's called behavioral conditioning, where I can shape your behavior by conditioning you with reward and punishment. It's not as all-encompassing anymore today, but certainly still a very important factor in therapy. So, but this, Franklin does the same thing, Benjamin Franklin, well, he's centuries before them. How may the cure be? He who is of a hot temperament should be taught to demean himself this wise. If he be smitten and cursed, he must not feel the insult at all. Now, if you're hot-tempered, Somebody insults you, you want to hit him, accept the insult and keep on doing this. And eventually anger will be rooted out from his heart. He who is arrogant should accustom himself to a life of extreme self-abasement. In other words, if you are the snob, try dressing like the poor person and living like the poor person, feel the shame that they feel, and you will get that snobbery or that haughtiness out of you. What will happen in both of them is they'll find a balance. Return to the middle way, you'll find it through your lifetime. And this you should follow in all the rest of tendencies. If you went to the extreme of one point, remove to the extreme of the other, then follow it up a long time to come to the middle. Right? So I think like in treatment of any addiction, from one addiction we go to the opposite completely before we try to rebalance. So on, he goes on and on with the law codes, the usual things that we know, Shabbat, halays, kashrut, male-female relations. He's now going to go a step further. He's preparing a constitution for the future. And he builds up civil laws and criminal laws. He builds up laws of sacrifice and purity for the temple. He actually gives instructions what should be done in the temple because he's expecting it in his day. He's a good Jew. Every Jew expects it right in his day. And then if that's the case, a king and a Jewish polity need laws of government. So he goes and he wraps up his the Mishneh Torah, the laws of kings and the laws of government. Right? He's in the style of Plato, the philosopher king. The enlightened king, he knows the teachings of the Torah, knows the religion. He's going to rule with a strong hand to make sure the country is operating correctly. He's not an easy-go-lucky type. All right, so but what happens? The king Messiah will arise and reestablish the monarchy of David as it was in former times. Rebuild the sanctuary, gather in the dispersed of Israel. These are explicit in the Torah and said by all the prophets. Now, how do we know who is the Messiah? If a king arrives from the house of David, versed in Torah, engages in commandments, as David his father, with written and oral Torah, and enjoins all of Israel following his ways and encourages them to breach his breaches and fights the wars of God, that he defends Israel, that may be the Messiah. That's how you know. If he succeeds and he defeats the enemies around, builds a sanctuary in his place and gathers the person of it, he definitely the Messiah. What does that mean? Anybody else who says he's the Messiah, if that has not happened, that's not the Messiah for Jews. Right? That is a denial of Christianity in that. It's a denial also of Islam, of any other color. But if it does not succeed and he's killed, maybe he was not the true one. He may have been a good king, but things go on. Some of the wise will stumble. Its time is yet appointed. It takes from Daniel. Right? We made a mistake. He's not the right one. That's how we know. Truth. The proof is in the pudding, in the history. So now, what about Christianity and Islam? He does not like either. What's happening in his lifetime? Christians and Muslims are battling each other to the death in the land of Israel over who rules Jerusalem. So he's sitting as a Jew. He's looking at both of them. And he's not very favorable to it. Right? He had to run away from Spain because of Muslim extremists. He knows the Jews in Europe were being attacked by Christians. So I don't think he has any reason to be especially open-minded. But he says this, all the doings of Jesus the Nazarene and that of that Ishmaelite, he won't say Muhammad, the Ishmaelite, other places Hamishuga, the crazy one. And I would not want to share that with my Muslim friends, but that's the word he uses. Comes after him nothing but to pave the way for the King Messiah. In other words, their function is to open the world to the Messiah. That's why they're there. When they realize that Messiahs were false, they will abandon him and turn to God's true Messiah. And he says, look at this. Look at the world is now already filled with matters of the Messiah and matters of the Torah and matters of the commandments. Right? Islam also has the idea of the Messiah, return, Mahdi, an ultimate end of days. Islam has it also. Christianity, looking for the return of Jesus, right? And he says they're discussing issues that were issues of the Torah and issues of the commandment. Knowledge of these matters have spread to the distant islands and the many nations of those with uncircumcised hearts. Look what's happening to people. It's not there yet, but this is important. When the true Messiah will rise and succeed, he will be lifted up and raised aloft. They will all immediately return and will know that their fathers left them an erroneous legacy and their fathers and prophets led them astray. Okay? When we get the real one up, they'll know we were right. Okay. What about miracles? Is the Messiah supposed to bring miracles? No great miracles. When someone says, oh, this is the Messiah because there are miracles, says, no, the laws and statutes of the Torah never change. May not add nor detract from them. And then he says, what about the wolf lie with the lamb, the sheep and the leopard with the kid? That's a parable, he says. That is, remember, just a metaphor for the nations of the world around us. Everything that was written about the Messiah are parables, so do not look for any miraculous events to come with the era of the Messiah. That's what's going to happen. It will be a change of the political structure of the world. Basically, and he's quoting the rabbis, "En ben olam hazeh lo yemot HaMashiach, ela shibud galiyot." There's no difference between this world and the days of the Messiah, except the subjection by the Jews to the rule of the nations of the world. That ends. Jews are independent. That is the definition of a messianic era. So in some sense, we are seeing it. Is it a messianic era? Well, if it continues, then it is. If it doesn't, we were led astray. But that's how we will test. So finally, he wraps up. He says, well, what is all of this about? Why this whole idea of a reign, of a messianic period? Why at all have a return of the children of Israel to the land of Israel under a Davidic king, under a restoration of a temple? What is that for? And so he comes up with the last chapter. He says, the sages and prophets did not long for the days of the Messiah because they wanted to rule the world, because they wanted to have dominion over the non-Jews, or because they wanted the nations to exalt them, because they wanted to eat and drink and be merry. In other words, this is not for the rule of the super race. This is not for the rule of the Obermensch. Right? No. It's not for that. It is not to rule the nations of the world. It is rather desired they should have time for Torah and wisdom. It is to create an entity that would be left alone. No one would oppress them or force them to be idle from Torah, and in this order they may merit the world to come. And he talks about the laws of repentance and so on, right? That as a nation, the nation will be worthy of the world to come. And at that time, there'll be no famines, no wars, no envy, no competition, right? There would be peace. Nations would be able to live in peace. For the good will be very pervasive. All the delicacies will be readily available as dust. The world will only, then it goes to the whole world. The world will only be engaged in knowing God, and then they'll be very wise, and they will achieve knowledge of the creators to a higher degree as humanly possible. For it says, for the earth shall be filled with knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. From the teachings of Yeshayahu Isaiah. And he concludes, blessed be Hashem who helped me. All right, what a magnificent ending. In other words, what are we looking for in all of halakha, in all of our observances? Going from the premise of a faith in one God through a premise that we can take charge of our lives if we do the right actions and treat ourselves, our minds as we treat our bodies healthily, and treat our social body healthily as we do. And then use the halachot and the mitzvot as a way of conditioning us and training us. That's how he's going. Meriting being brought back into our land, creating a polity which then sets an example for humanity, and all humanity then no longer is engaged in warfare or destruction, but in the search of truth, of divine truth. You can't find a greater summation of what it is to be a Jew than in this kind of statement from the Rambam. So I'm going to stop the screen share at this point. Any questions in particular? We've been going on and on and on. Okay, so you can see how he's taken, right? Jewish law. Next week, now we'll look how he goes even further. This is for every Jew. So he's setting every Jew as a right-thinking individual guided by knowledge and science and wisdom. in his Mishneh Torah, he's going to go even further to where very few Jews can comfortably stand, and sets the foundations for much of what eventually becomes Western civilization. And we'll see how that works, how it happens. Okay, any questions? Okay, and I'm going to call.
It means that Yigdal kind of summarizes what you have said, essentially.
Yeah. So the Yigdal, whoever was the author of Yigdal, took the 13 attributes of faith, the Ani Ma'amin, which was taken by somebody, took from Rambam's discussion in the Mishnah, about 13 principles that a Jew has to hold on to, and summarized it. So when you sing Yigdal, you're singing philosophy. Adon Olam is also the same idea. When you sing Adon Olam, you're singing philosophy. Very much so. Yeah. Okay. So with that, we're going to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Great week, and be healthy. The shots are coming out. It's be patient. They're getting better now. There's going to be a larger supply. They're increasing the 65 and above supply. Right now, they're finishing up the second set of shots. So, it's going to take a little while, another week or so. And I think they're getting better at the distribution. Certainly, and then they're going to start up with people under 65 who have existing health conditions. So I think it's going to be very important for a lot of us. All right, so be patient. It takes persistence to get through, but you can get it. All right, thank you,
Rabbi?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Have you heard the news out of Israel that they've developed a vaccine that has cured?
Yeah, not a vaccine, but treatment. Treatment. Ichilov Hospital. So they've had very good success rate with it, like 92% success, something like that. So I'm hoping that that will prove verifiable in larger numbers. The numbers out of Israel in terms of the vaccine also are very positive. Notice that the between Pfizer and Moderna, I think they're using more Moderna, but between the two, after the second shot, it's very effective. The infection rate has been like a percent of a percent of a percent, something like that, very small. And also in preventing spread. This was a concern because they knew that it would stop the virus for the person who got the vaccine, would have stopped that person from being a spreader. Because then it will become actually dangerous, because you'd think, I'm safe, I walk out without a mask, but I'm passing on. And said, no, it shows that while the virus might multiply inside the person, it doesn't multiply enough to actually exist in the nasal passages and the lung passages to be expelled and passed on to somebody else. And that's the critical point, very critical. So between, we should expect them to see in countries where vaccinations have started significantly, a reduction, both because of the vaccine and because of general herd immunity increasing, because that is happening. That is happening. For everyone who's tested, there are 3 who are not tested to have it without symptoms. So the United States should be, we're seeing a reduction. I think you're going to see increasing reduction in the United States, Israel certainly. By the way, India has had a reduction without vaccination, and nobody has figured out why. And the only theory they can have is that India is the average population in India very poor, lives in very poor conditions, that illness is actually a prevalent part of Indian life, and their bodies are used to foreign entities. And so they may actually be more resistant. That's the only theory somebody, right? Very different from other parts of the world, by the way, that have similar poverty rates. So a lot of unknown, but maybe, we're rounding the bend, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, whatever metaphor you want to have. Okay. So that's everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Yeah.
Rabbi, sorry.
Yeah.
Carmen has suggested that since we're seeing now that we might start services in the show, she wants to compile everybody should talk about how they cope with the COVID during this year, and send that stories to Carmen, and Carmen will compile that.
Oh, yeah. She was, yes, yeah. She was thinking of doing a newsletter. Right.
To help.
That's a, yeah. We'll have a little journal. That's right. We can share it. We can print it and mail and post it also. Yeah. Good that you brought that up. Yeah. We'll see. Purim will still do online, but we'll go from there. Once we know enough people have been vaccinated among our crowd, and we also want to include those who are not in the 65 plus but have medical conditions that they're covered, then we're all going to feel more secure.
Okay, look.
Okay, good Shabbos to everybody.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.